dunk it in the DMs or ask in Discord? I mean, it depends on like is your question like related to communism or DPRK or something? Is it something like it, it could be potentially discussed on stream, or if you rather put it in the Discord and that specifically DPRK? Well, I mean, today would be the day to ask. I'm gonna roll a doobie as well. I do have a couple travel vlogs that I want to look at. You sent it in DMs. Oh, did you send me a DM request? What is your question? What is the question about DPRK though? We could talk about it on stream. So it was talking about Juche and someone said they aren't real communists. I mean, I have a video specifically for that if you're interested. I actually spent a few hours discussing this just the other day. They link two things. Yeah, I bet it's this article. I bet it has to do with this article here. Yes, it includes them. Not You sent them in Twitch DMs? Okay. Let me see. Let me just see. Twitch DMs. Yes. This is literally well, I went through the first part of this just the other day. But so first of all, if you go here, there's a 3-hour video related to me discussing this. This is the 3-hour video here where I discussed the first part of like this article, which is Bill Bland talking about Korean revisionism. This is the other part of it. The Juche idea in the light of Marxism-Leninism. I mean, what do you want me to what do you want me to say about this? Are you watching my Juche lessons? You got to kind of read this. You're going to have like you got to read this and then compare for yourself, right? Kim Jong-il claimed in his essay on the Juche philosophy is an original revolutionary philosophy, that the Juche idea is no mere development of Marxism-Leninism, but an entirely new revolutionary philosophy. Oh no. Is this saying this is a bad thing? We must give a clear understanding of the Juche philosophy as a new revolutionary philosophy, not as a mere development of the preceding philosophy. And, quote, some development of materialism and dialectics does not constitute the basic content of Juche philosophy. Raid? What's the raid? And the Juche philosophy is an original philosophy which is fundamentally different from the preceding philosophy in its task and principles. So this part right here, like what's wrong with this? Yeah, Juche is an original philosophy. What, like, this is the funny part for me is I just want to see what it says here. Okay. In 1992, DPRK revised its constitution to exclude any reference to Marxism-Leninism. Oh dear. Oh no. Having previously described the Juche idea as a development of Marxism-Leninism, also in that year, the so-called Pyongyang Declaration was signed by a number of parties claiming to be Marxist-Leninists. I mean, it's ML applied to Korea, and it isn't. It is a new revolutionary philosophy, which I have talked about before. The mistake that people make is thinking that only one philosophy can exist in a space. It's like somehow what happened? Does the new philosophy emerge and like challenge the other one to the death? Like I guess in some cases that happens, but even in those cases where a philosophy is very critical of a preceding philosophy, there is oftentimes inheritance in that philosophy, right? Like if you look at Marxism Leninism, he does take inheritance from Kant while also critiquing it. He takes inheritance, especially from Hegel, while also being very critical of it, right? Is there specific things Juche rejects from Marxism Leninism? No. So here's a really good quote. Because first of all, let's address this part where it says previously described Juche as a development of Marxism Leninism. No, right? That's not what it will. I'll show you. There's a really good way to explain this right here. I'm gonna see if I can find this quote by Kim Jong Il. Right here. Now, he's not saying it's a development of Marxism Leninism here if you actually listen to this. Listen to what he says here. Kim Il Sungism was founded and has been developed in the course of safeguarding and embodying the ideological and theoretical achievements of Marxism Leninism. The Juche idea itself is an idea discovered in the process of the revolutionary struggle waged under the banner of Marxism Leninism. It is an idea which has opposed all trends of idealism and metaphysics, and strictly adhered to the materialistic and dialectical stand. The revolutionary theory of Kim Il Sungism is also a theory which was founded and enriched in the course of protecting the revolutionary quintessence, the revolutionary aspect of Marxism Leninism theory, from bourgeois and opportunist theories, and creatively and applying them with the developing it in line with the requirements of the revolutionary practice of our times. So, Juche is not really necessarily a development of Marxism Leninism. It considers Marxism Leninism to already be a correct interpretation of the material laws. And since society exists in the material world, those material laws inherently act on society. Now, when society reaches a certain material level or activates a certain material law, that can appear to be a spontaneous thing. But actually, it's the result of people in society working to try and develop society. And in the course of capitalist and class-based societies, ones based on class exploitation, those societies have, of course, further restricted by the reactionary forces that struggle against history from happening. Right? So, like, this is the thing with this article. Like, it's people will link you this same article over and over again. But it's completely out of context. Like just right there in the very first line, they're completely misrepresenting what Juche is. It being an original philosophy does not mean that it contradicts Marxism Leninism, right? In fact, in order to be extremely studied in Juche, if you want to be a social scientist in DPRK, then you would have to study Marxism Leninism and Juche. Because again, Marxism Leninism is those material laws. And because society is in the material world, those material laws act on society. Juche, on the other hand, is a universal revolutionary philosophy. It's universal in that anyone can use it and apply it and better understand the world around them. Especially, and this is the most important part for me, and I think the part that why I have such an interest in encouraging comrades to actually study Juche is because it has an analysis of two things: how to correctly interpret Marxism Leninism, and thus how to apply it for your own conditions is the first important thing for me. And the second thing I find so important about it is the fact that it gives us an analysis of socialism that has not existed before. We see how DPR displays Lenin and Marx a lot. Yeah. And I mean, the idea that you have the funny thing is, right, is that this right here is treating Marxism Leninism like a religious dogma. Oh, the more times you mention Marx and Lenin, the more portraits of Marx and Lenin you have, right? The more fucking communist your revolution is. One thing that I do love about Juche is it reframes the understanding of Marxism that as if the working class, the ideology of the working class is like the guiding force of the society, and the masses themselves have the power in the society, the working masses, then that society will be intrinsically be developing towards socialism, whether or not it has an explicit Marxist-Leninist program. Now, Marxist-Leninists and Juche followers believe that having that Marxist-Leninist understanding is an extreme benefit. But this is why I point out, like, the Iranian Revolution, for example, and to completely characterize it with one thing and ignore all of the social forces that actually act in that revolution is a mistake for one thing. But the other thing is, if we understand that Iran is developing in a progressive direction, fighting against imperialism and also against capitalism, the worst forms of capitalism, then we understand that it is developing towards a socialist society. I mentioned that they tried to apply the Russian Revolution conditions to Korea, which is just wrong to do. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. What is the implication then? That everybody has to just dogmatically follow existing practices and forms of Marxism Leninism? That's exactly the problem that our communist parties have here. They're completely paralyzed by dogmatism, right? They refuse to creatively apply and use Marxism Leninism for their own situation, to actually analyze the conditions, to use it like a guide to action, and then, that's the number one problem that we're fighting against in the West here. There's another good quote by Kim Jong il where he mentions about philosophy as well. But just like I was saying, the really good benefit about Juche for us is it does allow us to better understand socialism, as in how to describe China as socialist, how to defend it as a socialist society, DPRK, Cuba, etc., even better than Marxism alone does. It gives you additional ammo to fight the fucking left comms who try to define it as something Marx said in Critique of the Gotha program. This right here is my favorite quote from Kim Jong il. One of them. Why should we be misunderstood by others that we are advocating for nationalism? When we created the wonderful Juche idea of universal importance that has inherited and developed the progressive ideologies of mankind. It is wrong to think that only natural sciences have continuity in their development. Social sciences and philosophical thoughts also develop continuously. We should always consider all things and phenomena from the viewpoint of development. All things have two aspects: inheritance and innovation. To observe only one aspect is a metaphysical viewpoint. We ain't gonna make it. We ain't gonna make it this month. That's okay. I'll do a more realistic goal next month. See, I love that quote there. Like, what else does this say? Those events need to be seen. It's trying to exert leadership role over the various communist parties. Yeah, that's it. DPRK wanted to be hegemonic, everybody. In this context, in this context, should be also seen the WPK's desire to foist the Kim's Juche idea onto the international communist quote unquote movement, under the pretext that Marxism Leninism had shown its limitations and theoretical immaturities. In analyzing socialism, yes, it absolutely has. So, what exactly is the Juche idea, which WPK claims? Not so many words, mind. The international proletariat is in need of to explain present day conditions, now that Marxism Leninism has shown its limitations. Like, and again, so it just shows here, like, they're showing it's an original philosophy. Okay, that doesn't contradict. And then gets into a bunch of bullshit here. Like, I feel like people can go through, but like, look at this. Listen to this. Okay, this is the worst part here. I'm gonna read this one part because this tells you everything you need to know. So he quotes some base parts by Kim Jong Il and stuff. So first of all, he says, in a nutshell, he doesn't deny that the universal laws and categories of dialectical materialism operate in nature and society, and by definition, thought as well. He also does not deny that the laws of social development operate in society. As he says, quote, this is Kim Jong Il, of course, society too changes and develops in accordance with a certain law, not by humanity's own will. Some of the laws of society govern every society, in general, irrespective of social systems, and some of them govern a particular society. But Marxism Leninism, according to Kim Jong Il, mechanically applies dialectical materialism to society. Is that what he says? Let's read and find out. The major limitation of the materialistic, I feel like he's actually left out a huge part. Hold on. Yeah, he did. He's left out. He doesn't say, okay. I love how they always leave out parts of this quote. The major limitation of the materialistic conception of history is that it failed to correctly expound the peculiar law of social movement and explain the principles of social movement mainly on the basis of the common character of the motion of nature with the social movement, in that both of them are the motion of material. Yes, true. That's a true fact. Again, as I just said, Marxism Leninism discovered those material laws that also act on society, as society is a part of the material world. What Juche did is discover those peculiar laws that historical materialism overlooks in its long analysis of history. That's all it does. It discovers the peculiar social laws of revolution, such as, I'll give you an example, the social law that the masses' ideological level of independence is what determines the readiness of revolution. Not the weakness of imperialism in one place or another, not how highly developed capitalism is. This has been proven by history. The key factor is how ideologically prepared the masses are. Now that means that could be caused by war, right? That could be caused by external powers coming in and restricting their independence. And so the knowledge, the mass understanding that your independence has been restricted is much clearer than in some place like the West, where we have this false consciousness of illusion amongst many people. Right? So what are they arguing against that? And that's the funny thing about whenever you see these people who argue against Juche, because they in their desire to try and disprove Juche, they actually disprove reality, right? They actually fight against reality, because that's what Juche is doing. It's just helping you understand different aspects of reality in a more detailed way. Again, Marxism helps us to understand in the most detail the material aspects of society's development, and then we can, of course, glean a lot of things about the social aspect. Juche just helps us perfect that understanding of the social aspect. Again, it's why Marx had the revolution would be where capitalism is most developed. It's why Lenin thought revolution would be where imperialism is weakest. But Juche comes in and says no, it's where the masses are most ideologically awakened of their consciousness of independence. That's not a break with Marxism Leninism. That's just understanding how the masses behave in a historical materialist world, right? In that material world that dialectical materialism expounds. It just explains how the masses behave. That's all it does. Is this a criticism of someone that materially affected by the conditions in DPRK? No. What do you mean? No, this is not. This is a criticism of a hoaxists. And then he explains this more, and he says Marxist materialist conception of history broke down society into social being and social consciousness, and attached decisive significance to the social being. It also broke down the social structure into productive forces and productive relations, foundation and superstructure, and attached decisive significance to material production and economic relations. All of those things are true. Now, this part here is where they're being. This part here is where, I mean, it's not that it's spread so quickly. It's not spread so quickly. If you go to the global south, Eleni, like, you won't hear this shit. This is purely a Western Marxism problem. This is a problem of our Marxists being so academically lost in the fucking anti-communist sauce that they can't actually give Juche a beneficial reading, an actual reading that's like trying to understand what it's actually saying, and instead they read it looking for what to critique it on. But see, so this part right here is, I want to highlight this part to you. Because it says, Marxism-Leninism, according to Kim Jong-il, mechanically applies dialectical materialism to society. That's what this article is claiming Kim Jong-il is asserting. Well, when we look at Kim Jong-il's own words here, he says, Marxist materialist conception of history broke down society into social being and social consciousness, attached determining significance to the social being. It also broke down the social structure into productive forces
that will change your whole way of thinking
and production relations. Thank you so much for the resub, Eastern. Foundation and superstructure, and attached decisive significance to material production and economic relations. All good so far. And then he says, this means an unaltered application of the principle of the materialistic dialectics to society. That's the key part right there. The principle that the world is of material and changes and develops in accordance with the general law of the motion of material. The world, viewed by the founders of Marxism, when applying the general law governing the material world to social history, is an integrity of not only nature, but also humanity and society, in that they are material beings. If you consider humanity as part of the world and material integrity, and not as a social being with independence, creativity, and consciousness, and apply the general law of the movement of material world to social history, you cannot avoid seeing the socio-historical movement as a process of the history of nature. True. Rather than instead, Juche instead says that the socio-historical movement is not a process of the history of the development of nature. Well, the development of nature has made our biological beings possible. Actually, no. Social history is the development of our own socio-historical inheritance as a social being. Not something that has developed biologically, right? And of course, different stages of society, different levels of material production have allowed us to be at a different level of consciousness, right? Of course. But that's not like, it's not a perfect reflection. It's not like as soon as people live under capitalist society, they all instantly become capitalist minded people. Hence hence the leftovers of like beliefs of old societies from even before that, right? The same with like socialism. You can't build a socialist society and everybody instantly becomes socialist. Because while it is true we are a reflection of our material world, there is an active process of ideology that's involved and ideological training, whether that's through education, intercourse with with other human beings, your parents, your peers, etc., etc. All of these things are what shape the actual ideas of a society. So it's not that it just comes from the productive forces, right? That's an unscientific understanding. It's like, imagine thinking that somehow your consciousness is just like fed to you directly from the productive forces. No, the level of productive forces allows your consciousness to be at a certain level of development, but it still requires the positive input of humans, right? And in fact, the bourgeoisie can use reactionary ideology to fight against the development of humans, as we know, and slow down the social development of humanity, and even put it in great risk, great jeopardy. Right? That's able to be done through our ideology. That's because all of humanity's activities are done through our ideological consciousness. Everything. There is nothing that happens in human society that is not done through your ideological consciousness. And you have two forms of consciousness. You have your technical consciousness that can understand the objective material laws, and then you have your ideological consciousness that determines whether you fight for a progressive or whether you fight for the reactionary. Now, the reason why this is like disingenuous here is saying that Marxism Leninism, according to Kim Jong il, mechanically applies dialectical materialism to society. No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying this means an unaltered application of the principle of materialistic dialectics to society. Would mean that. But you know what? Marx and Engels themselves didn't even do that. Historical materialism is not just a perfect unaltered application of the laws of dialectical materialism to social history. It is used to analyze social history. But remember, again, to overcome limitations of like that understanding that I just talked about, they themselves came up with rules and theories as to why this would be the case. So this proves that even Marx and Engels understood that you couldn't just directly apply the laws of material motion to understanding social history because of human consciousness, which Engels, by the way, talks about extensively. But again, in these people's drive to be anti-Juche, they also end up being not only anti-reality, but anti-Engels and anti-Marx, right? And like, what the fuck is this analysis that they use here? Kim Jong il starts off by asserting that an apple is not an apple but an orange, and proceeds to demonstrate beyond doubt that all the features of the orange, texture, feel, look, taste, etc., are those of the apple, but still asserts that the apple is an orange. What? Huh? What the fuck did that paragraph just say to me, and why is that insulting me? Why is this paragraph insulting me like this? When does he say any of that? What does that mean? Perhaps if we go on, we'll find out. The principle that the world is made of material and changes and develops in accordance with the general law of material is society too changes and develops in accordance with a certain law, not by man's own will. Material means objectively, i.e., independently of man's will, outside man's consciousness. But it seems Kim Jong il's mind operates according to a different logic than the rest of humanity, where 1 plus 1 really does equal 3, and where one can really square circles on a daily basis. When are we getting to the goddamn analysis part? But in the real world, his assertions are patent nonsense. It should be apparent now that the features I have outlined so far are those that have an identity with all brands of revisionism, from Bernstein's brand onwards, namely that new conditions necessitate the creative development of Marxism-Leninism, which in reality means divesting of its revolutionary essence. See? So here, they've already fallen off their own analysis. We've already established in their own words that Juche is not a development of Marxism-Leninism. Remember? It's not a creative development of Marxism-Leninism. We literally been through this. It's a new revolutionary philosophy that accepts Marxism-Leninism and dialectical materialism as its premise. That's the beautiful thing about Juche. That's one of the reasons why it is great. It understands that Marxism-Leninism has already correctly understood the material world or the material laws rather, that act on human society and govern its development. It's worse than a Jacobin article. It's a fucking hoaxes article. So, and again, the new conditions which necessitated creative development, or rather the emergence of this new philosophy, to be more accurate, is the establishment of socialism. Because if we're not utopians, right, if we're not like treating Marx as a religious dogma, then we understand that Marx and Lenin, and thus Marxism-Leninism, has very, very, very little to say about socialist society itself. That is why once you have established the skeleton of the socialist system, it becomes a very complicated struggle in a very different way than establishing the proletarian state power. Because there is no formula, right? There is no, like, again, Juche is essentially the very first analysis that we have to understand better socialist societies. That doesn't exist in Marxism-Leninism. It just doesn't, because Marx and Engels did not live through an established socialist system. And they were very careful to avoid being utopians. So they gave very general, very, very broad predictions and suppositions about socialism, and that's about it. Like, does this person actually give us any kind of fucking critique? Divesting from the limitations, ideological immaturities, necessitated its wholesale replacement. Again, necessitate. Laney, welcome in. So see, now he's making a claim here. He's saying that WRP's case being that Marxism-Leninism, limitations and ideotheoretical immaturities necessitated its wholesale replacement with the Kim scatterbrained petite bourgeois farrago of Marxism-Leninism, aka the Juche idea. This shouldn't come as any surprise to Marxist-Leninists who are well aware of the feudalistic personality cult that surrounds the two Kims. The anti-Marxist leadership theories that have been perpetrated in the DPRK, where it is said over 30,000 monuments of the great leader Kim Il-sung have been erected. Fuck you. Fuck whoever wrote this. Fuck whoever wrote this. Feudalistic personality cult. I mean, and then this part right here. The wholesale replacement with the Kim's replacement. Like Marxism, like again, the idea that like Marxism, Leninism was replaced in DPRK is absolutely ridiculous. First, we talked about this one. We said about this one already. I'm just gonna. I'll see if I can find another one too. Wait, a monument can mean anything with his name on it. Yes. And so what? So what if there's 30,000 monuments of Kim Il Sung? Does this person have any idea about Kim Il Sung's life? You know, like what the fuck does that mean? Exactly. It makes no fucking sense, does it? Like but I mean we can look at the way like they talk about Marx. Does this seem like they're rejecting Marx? Let's look at some quotes here. We love quotes on this channel. Let's see. Let's see how they talk about Marxism, Leninism. And let's see that. Let's see if they have wholesale replaced Marxism, Leninism. I bet we can get to the bottom of it, can't we? I'm willing to bet. Okay, let's see. Let's see if we can figure this out. Does this sound like, you let me know, chat, if it sounds like they have thrown out Marxism, Leninism here. Okay? Kim Il Sungism was founded and has been developed in the course of safeguarding and embodying the ideological and theoretical achievements of Marxism, Leninism. For all their limitations, we must not take a nihilistic approach to Marxism, Leninism, or cavil their authors. We must recognize the exploits Marx, Engels, and Lenin performed for mankind and respect them. Thanks to the creation of Marxism, Leninism, the socialist theory developed from fantasy to science. The working class was able to have a guiding ideology for the first time in history, and they could struggle vigorously against capitalism and for class emancipation, national liberation, and socialism. Respecting the authors of the theories is an obligation on us, in view of the principle of the juniors of the revolution respecting their seniors. Kim Jong-il. Marxism made clear that emancipation of humanity could not be achieved by individuals, and that the exploitation and oppression of man by man could be eliminated, and genuine freedom and equality for people could be realized only through the united efforts of the working class. I don't know, chat. Kind of sounds to me like he understands Marxism a little bit.
New tip from Twister Pokey.
Yo, Twister Pokey, thank you
with 15.
Thank you so much for the 15, comrade. Very much appreciate that. Very much appreciate your support. And anybody, your money right now goes a long way towards helping my kitty cat get some arthritis injections and antibiotics. Please consider. And then this part. Listen this one. Marx not only provided the working class and other working people with the weapon for their liberation struggle at the dawn of the proletarian revolution, but also paved the way for it by personally taking part in the revolutionary struggle. Kim Jong-il. How about this one? Owing to the limitations of the conditions of their times and their practical experiences, the socialist theories put forward by the authors of Marxism-Leninism could not go, in some cases, beyond the limit of prediction and supposition. So see, he's not saying Marxism-Leninism is wrong. He's specifically saying that the socialist theory, the parts of predicting socialism and explaining socialist society, They could not go beyond prediction and supposition. And Marx and Engels themselves never denied that because, again, they were not utopians, right? And then the last thing, how about this one right here? This one pretty cements it pretty good. Our scientists and people must study and follow the Juche philosophy. But they must also know the philosophical ideas of Marxism Leninism. The social scientists, in particular, must be well acquainted with the preceding philosophy. It is important to distinguish limitations and immaturity of the preceding philosophy along with its merits. I don't know, chat. Doesn't sound like they're rejecting Marxism Leninism to me. It sounds like they're creatively applying and scientifically developing Marxism Leninism for their particular situation. And again, all of this gets into stuff that's talking about redefining the nation and like what's wrong with the principles of Juche, etc., etc. But in regards to that, what I would say is go to my videos about Juche specifically, and I think that you will not only agree with the principles of Juche, but you will understand that the principles of Juche are not like a matter of opinion or something, right? Like the principles of Juche are explaining reality as it exists, you know? So whether or not they want to accept Juche's principles is like irrelevant to the fact that the Juche principles exist because it's an explanation of society as it develops, you know? And that's kind of the funniest thing about, and that's why I say when you actually look at their critiques, they either fall into being like anti-Marxist in weird ways in trying to discredit Juche, or they end up being anti-reality in funny ways in trying to discredit Juche. I just didn't know how to debunk the article, even though it seemed annoying and had nothing to say except the apples and oranges quote. Yeah, well, I hope I did help a little bit with that. That's why I wanted, you know, that's why I did want to talk about it on stream. I did want to get to that article anyway, several days ago. So, it actually worked out that you brought that up. I think that's something to think about, and I would say if you're watching this on my YouTube, go to my other video, which explains, first of all, the social being would probably be a good one to watch, and also if the debunking Bill Bland on Korean revisionism is like the first part of this discussion. Like and subscribe.